I had been away from my ranch for quite some time, tending to work and responsibilities that kept me far from the quiet land I call home. The drive back was long, but as the dirt road came into view and the familiar wooden gate stood tall at the entrance, a sense of peace washed over me. The sun was setting low, painting the sky with deep shades of gold and crimson, and the fields stretched wide, untouched, waiting for my return. Every fence post, every trail, every stone held memories of long days of work and calm nights under the stars, pulling up to the front porch. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter from old gatherings and the hum of cattle in the distance. The air was different here, cleaner, freer, and filled with a silence that city noise could never imitate. My boots crunched against the gravel as I stepped out of the truck, taking in the sight of the ranch house that had stood strong for generations. I felt a surge of pride knowing this was my land, my heritage, the place where I could finally breathe without walls or neighbors pressing in as I was unloading a few things from my truck and soaking in the calmness of being back. I noticed movement. At the edge of the property, there she was, an HOA, Karen, in full force, standing stiff with her arms crossed, glaring like I had no right to be there. Her eyes darted from my boots to the house and then to the land around us, as if she was making mental notes for some imaginary rulebook. Without even approaching me, she whipped out her phone and started dialing, her voice carrying across the air as she loudly announced that a trespasser had broken into the ranch. She spoke with this strange confidence, like she owned the place, pacing back and forth as if she were directing some sort of operation. Her tone was sharp, rehearsed, almost like she had done this before, waiting for an audience to back her up. Every gesture screamed entitlement, the way she pointed at my truck, the way she whispered into the phone, as though narrating a crime scene. I could feel the tension building, the absurdity of being accused of invading my own land. And all I could do was watch as she summoned the police to my front gate. Didn't take long before the sound of sirens broke the evening calm. Reddened. Blue lights flickering against the wide-open fields of my ranch. 2 police cruisers rolled up the gravel road, their tires kicking up dust as they pulled in behind my truck. The officers stepped out quickly, their hands resting near their belts, scanning the property like they were walking into a situation already decided. Karen was standing proudly near the gate, waving them over like she had just caught a criminal in the act. She wasted no time in pointing directly at me, her voice rising as she explained that I had no business being there, that I was trespassing, and that immediate action needed to be taken. The officers, trusting her word, approached with stern faces and clipped tones, asking me for identification and proof of ownership as though I were some stranger on my own land. Their questions came rapid and sharp, assuming guilt before understanding the truth. The weight of the moment was heavy, the absurdity almost laughable. Watching the balance of authority tip toward a woman who had no claim to the ground beneath her feet, stood calmly, letting the officers finish their questions, knowing the moment would turn as soon as I spoke. Karen's smirk grew wider, certain she had the upper hand, certain the police would drag me off my own land while she watched with satisfaction. That's when I reached into my jacket and pulled out the identification that carried more weight than she could ever imagine. I explained who I was, not just a ranch owner returning home, but the overseer of every HOA across the United States. The officers froze, their eyes shifting from suspicion to surprise as they processed what I had just revealed. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to interrupt, insisting her word mattered more, but the confidence in her tone faltered. I laid out the facts plainly, explaining my role, my authority, and the responsibility I carried that stretched far beyond the boundaries of this ranch. The air grew thick with silence as the officers looked at each other, realizing the situation was not what they had been led to believe. The smirk on Karen's face faded quickly, replaced with the uneasy, Twitch of someone who realized the ground beneath her feet was slipping fast. The shift in the atmosphere was almost immediate. The officers who had moments earlier stood tall and authoritative now exchanged glances with a mixture of unease and respect. Karen, on the other hand, looked as though the rug had been pulled out from under her. Her confident posture collapsed into fidgeting hands and darting eyes, as if she was searching for a way to rewrite the scene unraveling in front of her. She opened her mouth to argue, but her words stumbled over each other. No longer sharp or commanding, just frantic and disjointed. The officers stepped back slightly, no longer pressing me with questions, but instead turning toward her, questioning the validity of her claims. Every ounce of smugness drained from her face as the weight of her mistakes settled in. The silence between us was louder than any siren, and for the first time since she stormed onto my property, Karen had nothing left to say. The authority she thought she held crumbled in seconds, and the realization that she had tried to challenge someone far beyond her reach left her standing frozen in place. Unable to process the consequences of what she had just triggered, I let the silence stretch for a moment, the kind that forces everyone to feel the weight of what has just happened. Then I spoke with a steady tone, not raising my voice, but making sure every word carried. I reminded Karen and the officers that power built on lies and intimidation doesn't last long, and that authority is only real when it is backed by truth. The ranch stood behind me as more than just land. It was proof of legacy, ownership, and the right to live free without being bullied by false rules or entitled demands. I explained that homeowners associations were created to serve communities, not to become tools of harassment, and that when someone like her twisted that purpose, she was stepping into dangerous territory. The officers nodded slowly, clearly understanding the lesson that stretched beyond this one moment. Karen's head dropped, her eyes avoiding mine, no longer daring to challenge me. I didn't need to raise my hand or demand respect, because the reality of who I was and the authority I carried spoke louder than any confrontation could. The tables had turned completely, and for the first time she understood that her control was nothing but an illusion.